I came to notice the signs, like on Monday, for example, if we didn't have a good weekend on the football games, we didn't have a nice person in our home. Like chances are he had drank a lot the night before and lost a lot of money or whatever, tried to bail himself out on the last football game, you know, Sunday night or Monday night's your last bet.
Right, try to get that parlay.
Yeah, double or nothing. Try to get out of the shits, you know.
Ladies and gentlemen,
you are now about to witness
the journey that is the Lyfe Choyces podcast.
Yeah!
I wanted to touch on a topic that you had briefly mentioned on you might not have mentioned it on the episode, but I know we talked about it a bit after the episode, was the relationship that you had with your stepfather.
Yes.
Which was not wonderful.
No.
So let's dive right into it and talk about this.
So when I was born, my first father, my real dad, first father, he had actually, was out of the picture pretty early on. I think I was maybe about a year or so old, and as an adult now, I've come to kind of understand how that is a possibility. A lot happens in that first year of having a child. So it kind of makes sense. And I had my mom. I was the only child at that point, and my mother had a couple of boyfriends in between my father and then the man she eventually ended up marrying. So that's kind of an odd experience already for, I think, a child anyway, to kind of come up that way, because this is before I can even really remember. I remember bits and pieces of these people and stuff. And then she met my stepfather, and they were a good match, I think, at that age. Eventually, my stepfather came into the picture, and I think he was kind of like what every 20-something-year-old girl like really look forward to in a man at that age. Kind of like a party animal, more or less. I think we're all at that age, and he was an example of somebody who didn't really grow out of that for a really long time. He kind of had a lot of difficulties raising kids. I think when it was just me, it was probably a lot more simple of a life, but then we added another sibling when I was 7 years old. And I think that's when the stress started kind of coming out as the type of parenting style he used. He was one of several siblings. I think he was the youngest of, I want to say, 13 children. So he grew up in that household, which, I mean, at that point, you're probably raised by your siblings, And I also believe that his father, if I'm not mistaken, was out of the picture fairly early on in his lifetime also. So I don't think he had a good example of how to raise kids, and probably just grew up in a generation of seen and not heard, kind of, which is kind of like ending when we were children. So that was sort of like his parenting style. And once the kids started coming, I have a brother and two sisters. Once that started happening, I think the stress just kind of mounted, on him as a man trying to provide for his family, and just kind of someone who, I don't know, was constantly battling with demons. And it wasn't necessarily just like drugs and alcohol. I think there was like other things involved also in like the equation, which I didn't fully understand as a child, but now I'm an adult. I see, where there was a lot of things going very wrong.
I think that's the biggest takeaway for us as we grow older. We don't understand, or we're not aware of what our parent or parents are going through, because we don't quite understand life yet. Like you said a moment ago, when we are younger ourselves, we don't have a worry of what's going to happen tomorrow. Yes. We don't even think really about tomorrow because it seems so far away. Where now tomorrow is like 10 seconds from the time we're talking.
Exactly.
It's a real big difference.
It is quick.
And now that we are of an age that we've experienced life a bit more, we understand how fucking difficult it is.
Yes.
And regardless, like let's not even add on to it if you have an addiction to something like drugs or alcohol. Just life itself is fucking consuming.
Yep.
And on a best day, it can be difficult. So having that understanding now as an adult, knowing that, okay, maybe there might have been a few other underlining issues as to why that person was the way they were towards you, is a mature way to look at it.
Yeah.
Do you think, and we'll get more into it, the way he was, like you said, it was easier when it was just you, and that was for however many years before him and your mom decided to have 3 of their own kids together. You were the one that wasn't his blood child. And I have to wonder, was maybe that a reason why the relationship was a bit difficult?
No, I think that for it was never like that. I never felt that way, that I was like cared for any less or handled differently. I think as the children all grew, like all my siblings grew, I think that he was also aging, and the way he handled basically the same situations more or less with each child as they aged out was probably a little more mature on his end of things. I just happened to be the first one to go through in a stage of his life when his priorities weren't his family. You know, like that wasn't his priority. Like me right now.
And he made that very clear. You're saying like you were about
to me,
7.
I felt like it was, I was young. I was young when I realized that, you know, I didn't know that at the time. I know that now looking back, but I was pretty young when like I saw a regular constant, it was like a cycle, you know, like we almost knew he wasn't going to be home on the weekends, kind of like when my mom was there with these like little young like babies, you know, somebody needed to help her at that point, you know, and there was a small community of mothers that were kind of sympathetic that, you know, I would hang out with their children, you know, to just take the lighten the load by one or whatever it might have been. But, you know, it was definitely like a selfish time in his life for sure, you know, and it reflected, it was something that affected the whole family.
Right.
Sure.
And he was how oldish about?
Like mid 30s, mid
30s, still hadn't grown up fully yet.
Yeah,
I mean, he had to hold on to the
He
weekends.
had to get to his like 50s. We've gotten past that stage, but
what was that stage like?
Well, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. I used sports, I think, to kind of like separate myself from reality.
It took you away from what was going on in the home.
And it wasn't so much like I was being physically abused or something. It was, I want to say, like, looking back, like the worst part would probably be like, you know, I caught my whoopings, and sometimes it was, you know, maybe necessary, and sometimes it wasn't. You know, sometimes it had nothing to do with me even. But I think the mental part of it, I think it was kind of like, how would you label it? Kind of like a narcissistic behavior, you know, like someone's kind of like shitty to you, and then they kind of like
it's called verbal abuse.
Yeah, they make it out to be your fault.
You can justify it any way you want because you're now an adult.
Mm-hmm.
You have obviously forgiven him for whatever may have transpired at that time. And like you said, you guys have all moved past this. You're all adults. You're all living life as a happier family.
Yeah.
But there's multiple forms of abuse that happens, and verbal abuse is a very prevalent thing. And back then, it might have been at that time where the physical disciplining of child was still there, but kind of on its way out. So it doesn't just change. It's not just snap of the fingers and everything's perfect.
Like generational.
Yeah. And during that transition, it could have, which clearly sounds like it went from, you know, he didn't physically abuse you to discipline you, but it seemed like to deal with his own inner demons and then to deal with the fact of 1, 2, 3, 4 children, the verbal abuse was coming out. It must have to the point where you feel the relationship wasn't good at that time.
Yeah. When I was a child, I kind of like, I don't know, I kind of always thought I was going to move in with my real father. And I never really understood why, but now kind of that I'm an adult again and looking back on that, I don't think he was necessarily in a position where he felt like that was going to work, you know. That was his decision, I think, because like I was all in, you know. I was like, yeah, go live with my dad. It's always fun at his house, blah blah blah. But you know, that's easy when it's only a few hours a week.
The stuff that started happening, imagine around 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, you're the eldest of 4 children in a household with a man that has not yet grown up to the point of understanding his responsibilities as a father.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you were dealing with?
I would have to come home from school. I would get off the school bus hours before anyone would be home. You know, I'm probably 8 years old, 9 years old. And I would be in my school clothes, which I'm sure you being my age, you probably had school clothes and, you know, play clothes, right? So I would have my school clothes on, and if I got them dirty, I would catch an ass whooping, like beyond necessary, you know. And that wasn't even about my fucking school clothes being dirty. It was about whatever his shitty day was and his shitty like position that he was in, you know. There was a lot of things that I realize now growing up that factored into that. So he had a relatively bad gambling problem. Like, and when I say relatively bad, I mean like had to have other family members like bail him out. And this is a man who makes probably more than enough money at the time to have probably paid our home mortgage off in that era, you know, in the 80s and 90s. That could have been like gone in like 6 years, you know, 8 years if they focused on that. But this is, mind you, you know, second mortgages and stuff went towards these habits of gambling and like losing. So it was kind of like, I don't know, that was an underlying pressure that he probably always had, you know. And I came to notice the signs, like on Monday, for example, if we didn't have a good weekend on the football games, we didn't have a nice person in our home. Like chances are he had drank a lot the night before and lost a lot of money or whatever, tried to bail himself out on the last football game, you know, Sunday night or Monday night's your last bet.
Right, try to get that parlay.
Yeah,
or
double
something.
or nothing, try to get out of the shits, you know. And, you know, if that didn't work, it was like it had to come from somewhere, you know. So.
And then Monday throughout the rest of the week, I'm sure you probably got the brunt of it being the older one, and psychologically a person in that position would, you don't think they think about this, but unconsciously probably think, oh, the older one's the tougher one, he can handle. I'm going to fucking take it out on him.
Yeah.
And that's
I was really just a kid at the time. You know?
I mean, you were an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
You were a child.
And it's just one of those things, you know, that I think I'm a stronger person because like shit happens and I know it's always going to happen. And I don't wear it. Like, I feel like I have thicker skin kind of because of my upbringing in that sense. Like, you know, it's...
Well, how can you not if you go through situations like that and you still come out on the other end as a good human being, which you are, and clearly an attentive father, a caring father, a good husband, a human being that communicates with his wife.
Yeah.
You know, like all of these things are obviously very much there. So all of that came from understanding what you went through and not letting it affect you over time in a negative manner, which creates the thicker skin.
Yeah. And, you know, it's one of those things. There's other, as negative as some of these might sound, it wasn't like it was a constant either. You know, I can't say like my whole childhood was just full of these like painful memories. It wasn't the case. You know, there was normal family shit in there too, you know. It's just like when it wasn't good at all, you know. So
yeah, we're painting the picture of what possibly could happen in a household where someone has a step parent. And not many people's lives were always a bed of roses. Not saying at the same time that anyone's life was just a constant parade of this fucking sucks.
Yeah.
There were just these moments that you had to deal with certain things that
kind
a
of
child
like
shouldn't have to deal with. Yeah.
And like another example would be like being kind of comfortable with violence at a young age because I would see it. You know, that's where you get into those like situations where you're like, wow, that was kind of like seemed like a bit much, just because there's something about that nature where when they like, you hear people say, I don't know what happened, I blacked out. You know, it's kind of like that kind of thing. That
you become the different personality that is within you, which
you're almost like watching it.
Right, you have like an out-of-body experience,
yes,
and what people don't always understand, and I'm very open about this, is I'm more than one human being. Like I'm aware of that. A friend of mine, Ben, was talking about when people say, "Oh, I'm a good person," it's like, yes, you are, but you're also a bad person because as a human, each one of us is capable to do all the extremes of one end to the other.
Yeah.
So knowing that every one of us has that program in our head where we can be violent, we can be kind, it's in all of us. It just depends on how you've lived your life or what things have triggered you in your life that brings out these things, or the choice that you make when the thought comes up of where the right and the wrong is like, I know it's not right to abuse a child.
Yeah.
Now, when I have a child, because I don't have any, I still feel like I'm going to discipline them on occasion with a smack, right?
Yeah.
I don't know as a person yet how far I will take that. I believe since I know the right and wrong and the level and where the line is crossed, I won't cross it.
Yeah.
But I do know that in my brain, I have the capacity to be on both sides of that field.
Yeah.
So,
And if anyone can bring it out of you, it's
going to be a child.
It's a child.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. You learn a lot about yourself. You do.
Self-control.
Because it's like, I don't want my kid. I don't think I'm going to have that problem where my children will view me how I've viewed my stepfather in the past. But they're going to eventually grow up and know what kind of person you are exactly. Like, we know what kind of person our parents are. Like, your father, your mother. But like when they're children or when they're kids, like sometimes you forget that they're going to grow up to be people also. So it's like you want to have your best intentions on the front, even if it's losing a battle occasionally, kind of.
And they're going to copy you. Like it's going to happen where they're going to take pieces of you, and that's going to create their personality in time. And yes, I obviously I can say I knew my father because he's gone for 7 years now, and I know what a great man he was. When I was a child, I didn't see it because I only saw the way in which I was treated.
Yes.
Right. But it wasn't my whole life. Like when I was not, like, there was a lot of stuff in my youth where like my dad was awesome.
Yeah.
Like did wonderfully great things. There was a lot of the time that the way I interpreted my upbringing was he wasn't the best man. But that's my interpretation as a child. Once I hit 19 and I moved out of the house and I saw all the things that he had been teaching me in the way in which he was doing it, I realized, holy fuck.
He's trying to make you a man, kind of.
And nothing, I only share my experiences as what that is. It's, I grew up in a house like this. I had these experiences. This is possibly a norm for you, the viewer, but I only speak in high regard now because I understand now at my age what he could have been going through up here.
Yes.
With everything that was on his plate.
Yeah.
With the way in which he was brought up from his father, who definitely was from a different time.
Yeah.
The belts were on the hook, and not like I didn't
like a paddle.
He didn't wear the belts. Those were just the belts that he hit the kids with. Like when him and his twin brother came home, if they had done something wrong, they got to choose which belt.
Oh God.
So like when you think about that as an adult, and then you see how you were treated when it comes to discipline or non-discipline, you have to understand that there's a lot of shit going on, and you don't know all that there is. Now, you said that you would know on a Monday if he had a bad weekend of gambling because
it
of
would be like
a different person,
just a fucking monster. Yeah.
And you were saying like there was also drinking involved in that aspect because
there was. I mean, he came from a different generation where you had like he was a construction worker, so that's just like they cut off on Friday. That was their weekend, drinking, partying. And like he would just like bounce. Like
you guys wouldn't even see him on the
like
weekend,
Sunday maybe.
Yeah.
Or if he did come home, like there would just be like this blowout between him and my mother, and we would leave for the weekend.
Okay.
It's like, and that wasn't like all the time. It kind of was like again, all factors involved. It depended what the storm was this weekend. It was like what we didn't have those experiences when it wasn't football season.
Okay.
For example, like looking back on that and recognizing that shit now, looking back, I'm like, oh, well, he didn't give a shit about baseball or hockey or basketball. So it was really only a fall.
It was those 16 weeks.
Yeah, it was just literally, so that was like a problem then, and I don't know. It's just weird to just like think about it because, I mean, different things will come up in my day with my son, who's now 7 years old, where it stirs up an experience that I may have had. And for me, that's kind of like, fucking asshole. I was his age when you did this to me. And that's the stuff that like really makes me like kind of fucking wish he was just here so I could be like, when you did this, and the craziest thing is too about all that is he probably wouldn't know. He probably couldn't narrow those moments down in his own mind to like when that happened, because it wasn't as significant of a moment in his life as it was mine. That's
and he might not even have a memory of it, because in those moments he might have either been drunk or just been so
or
gone up here,
out of his mind,
right? Like you're saying, he might have been that other person within him, and that person may have been when he was like blacked out. Not saying blacked out drunk, just blacked out. Like when you go off the deep end and you become angry, some people go to such an extent that they really don't know that they're being that way.
Yeah.
And then for someone to tell them 20, 30 years later that this is what you did during this time, and this is how it made me feel, they might literally look at you and like, I have no record. I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah. 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 No, I could totally see that being a problem. Now we have a very good relationship when we see each other. Excuse me. It's not like any animosity or anything like that. Like he sees a man handling his shit. I feel like we all kind of came out normal. We all have like different interpretations of our childhood. Cause like I said, I was like the trial. I was like the test drive parenting. I was 7 years older than my middle sister. And then her being the first girl, I could see that was probably handled a little differently, but still on the aggressive side. And then the boy and then the youngest, I don't think they had the same, like as me and my sister had that really aggressive upbringing. Whereas like, I think the two youngest, we were getting more into like, his 50s and like kind of.
As a human himself, you've maybe kind of slowing down a bit.
Yeah, slowing down a little, and, maybe occasionally just taking a breath before reacting.
Well, maybe he saw, maybe at some point he realized the way he was parenting.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, not everyone gets a second chance. Not everyone gets a third chance. Most people don't get a fourth chance. Yeah. So from the idea of 4 children, maybe he at some point realized, like, listen, I still have 2 more kids that are going to go through those same ages. Yeah. Maybe I can shift a bit,
different approach,
and approach it differently, and hopefully, it's just better.
And it reflects in their personalities. Like my youngest sibling is like very like aware of herself and like her future and her surroundings, and like what's going on. And I think that's a pretty good quality for someone who's her age, because she's 14 younger than me. So she's 27.
She's under the age of 30. And that's that kind of that generation right now that is kind of aimlessly walking around the earth right now with all this like poor me and I had it so hard, where they don't really realize that, no, you didn't have it hard.
Yeah.
You didn't get physically abused. You didn't get verbally abused. You got put in timeout. You got asked how you're feeling about it.
Space in school. Yeah. We had in school suspension.
Yeah, that's it. Or you just got told not to come to school. And then you have to deal with your parents dealing with you, which is definitely a lot worse than if I just had fucking detention for a week. But it's amazing that you're saying that at her age, at 27, she's already owned a home. She sounds capable of understanding what the real world is like.
And just in my mind, that is just a slight tweak in the approach to parenting. There was a lot of positive things that came from having somebody like my stepfather. Also, I was a very competitive athlete, like growing up. Like I wanted to be either the best, that I was a large child, so I wasn't like the fastest, but like the things that were important to me, I really worked hard at, like pitching, catching, hitting the ball. Baseball was super important to me. So that was the things that we focused on. And he really like worked like I was a grown up. Like the way we trained was like him throwing fastballs at me and my new catcher's mitt, like he would buy the nicest stuff. So I always had I had the potential to always compete with the best children. I played baseball all summer after the end of school and the school team finished. I'd be on 2 or 3 more teams in the summer, So there was those things too that were like instilled in me also. So it wasn't all negative. It's just, unfortunately, like the negative things are the shit that people get hung up in their life on. They're just like can't can't move past it, and you kind of fucking have to get over it.
You need to. Oh no,
Yeah.
that's the best, the most factual statement of all time is we all dwell on the negative things that happened in our life, and those things that happened to us as a child, and I can completely admit this. I'm 46 and I'm still working on the things that when I see or hear something that trigger me about my youth,
Yeah.
like I know that I still have to work on it because I'm still holding on to these things. And if you focus on the things that were positive that were happening, and you forgive yourself and the others who had to be part of the situation, they're in the past.
Yeah.
They don't
And you
have to
can leave
define who you are now.
Exactly.
And when you share stories like this, it's important because we want people to understand that, yeah, here's a situation that happened. I didn't have a good relationship with my stepfather. My father and I did not have a wonderful relationship while I was in the house. We loved each other, but there was a lot of like negative shit that had happened, at least the way I interpreted it. But there was so many positive things that came from it.
Yeah.
And focusing on those will allow you to then put that forth in your parenting.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, yes, there was some verbal and maybe some slight physical abuse, but that was our lifestyle. That was what happened for discipline.
that's
We
the
don't look at
generation it
it.
happened
We
to.
don't look at it as using the word abuse as like such a negative.
Yeah,
we
there's
look
a
at it
lot
as
more
like,
people that could consider it abusive. Like I don't. It's hard. They were hard on us.
I
but
consider it was
wouldn't
upbringing.
Yeah.
it was just, that's the way life
Yeah,
was. I don't
kind of.
I don't hold any ill will towards my father for any time that he used physicality to discipline me, because I know the person I was back then deserved it.
Yeah.
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
But the fact that your stepfather then at the same time that this was happening treated you like an adult when it came to you training for sports. He didn't hold up and throw the ball lightly at you because you were a child. He dealt with it as if you were
Pounded that
an
in there.
adult.
And in football season, I remember having the fucking the threads of the football like
Across your
branded
chest.
on my chest from catching passes. So like just with so much behind them, so much mustard on it, dude.
And it's amazing because you sit here sharing this story and yet smiling.
Yeah,
about
I'm
that
laughing
story.
because that is like, you know, I don't think I could get away with doing that to my kid in the driveway. You know, someone
Not-
would probably
not
call the
nowadays.
cops. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a funny one because it's like those are the fond memories I have of him. It's like almost like people are like, my mom would always be like, Jesus Christ, you got to take it easy on him, you know, and then I'd go and compete with children my age, and it was fucking nothing.
Yeah,
you know what
you
I mean?
destroyed
I
him.
see right through him.
Yeah.
You know, I was like in 7th grade throwing a baseball like 70 miles per hour, you know, like that wasn't something a lot of children were doing at that point, you know.
But
so.
that's why I say the way certain aspects of the way in which we were brought up, I feel needs to be put back into parenting because you were treated like a man
Yes.
at an age that you weren't one yet.
Not even close.
And that helped you become a man, where you were able to take on it, not just the physical sports, but when you went out into the world and ended up going into the kitchens, which is a very high demand, very physical, very mentally exhausting industry, you were able to deal with a lot of stuff more likely than not
think clear in moments of like unclarity for everyone. I'd be like, well, what's the problem? Just do this. And they'd be like, oh, perfect. And then that would be the solution. And it's like, well, what's the problem? Why was that so difficult for us to
get to?
You guys are all in your emotions about how this situation makes you feel. It's not about your fucking feelings right now. It's about finding a solution to a problem. And that's why I always was in management and kitchens, because like I never took it so serious that it was going to ruin my day.
Well, that's why people say you've got to leave your personal life, leave it at the door when you come into work, because all that shit don't matter right now.
Yeah.
We have a task to do.
Yeah.
Let's get that done.
And it's like a team effort, even though you're in the front of the house and I'm in the back of the house. I will work with you here. You know, it's just an example, but it's,
but that's where, like, when you say, like, with your child now, it's unfortunate that parents like us, that I say us, people from our generation that are parents, that they feel that they have to worry about the way in which they're parenting their child because someone else might not like it.
yeah, because
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much to do with North America. It's not personal.
Yeah.
This is like
It's about raising a good quality person.
your responsibility is to make sure this child in 18 years, God willing, can physically and mentally be okay leaving the house.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, you kind of just have to stand there and now watch them from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. Which that's going to be, I don't look forward to that day, but I feel how it almost feels quicker and quicker. I'm like, oh, like every time a birthday comes around, I see the photos from every birthday. And I'm like, holy shit, this is kind of happening a little faster than I want it to.
Again, that's because we're at that age where a year is not 365 days.
No.
16 or 17 years, I've been working on yachts, traveling around the world. And I keep bringing this up on a lot of episodes. All of my nieces and nephews, the eldest is 17. He's got 1 year left to high school.
Really get to know him growing up at all.
Nothing more bothers me than the fact that when I see TJ, my roommate, the way he is with his nephews, the way I see him like that, and the relationship that they have, it breaks my heart because I chose. Now, again, they need to understand as they grow up and hopefully watch these shows, they don't know what was going on inside of my head for the past 46 years.
Yeah.
And so my choosing to be here doing this job and missing out on their lives, I now unfortunately wish I hadn't, because Ari, has only seen me in and around possibly 8 to 10 times his whole life.
Yeah.
So how can that relationship be as strong as I would have liked it? If I lived at home, I would have been around. I would have babysat. I would have taken him out throughout his years.
That's tough. I know exactly how you feel because I have a niece and a nephew. My sister, the next in line behind me, has children. She had children very young. Her first, I think, at 18 or 19. And I see her, she's younger than me, and her kids one of them's almost in high school or is in high school, and the next one's probably closer to my children's age. I see that, and I'm kind of like, I wasn't there. I have the pictures of me holding her oldest, it was right around the same. I'm kind of the same deal. I moved away 16 years ago also to this area, and that's it. That's all I have. Those are the memories. So now this family vacation we do every year kind of means that much more, to go and still be a part of their life, at least for once a year.
It's interesting how the way we were brought up transpires in the way that we then relate to our families, and then eventually translates into the way in which we bring up our children. Thank you again for coming by and sharing this experience with us here in our viewership. It's always a pleasure, Sam. Many more episodes together, I'm sure.
I'll be here.
Amazing. To everyone out there, thank you once again for coming back each and every week here. We'll see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. on the Lyfe Choyces podcast. Peace.
Ladies and gentlemen,
You are now about
The Journey, Life Choices podcast.